Good afternoon, Dr. Ghehlawdos. Thank you for coming for this interview. I really appreciate on behalf of the Ethiopian Observer and their supporters from Seattle around the world. Ethiopian Observer had conducted an interview on a major issue pretending to history, political economy, and current affairs on Ethiopia with Dr. Ghehlawdos, I believe, in 2012, if I am correct. In response, the constructive feedback of the interview was tremendous, and the present interview is focused on the current Ethiopian affairs. And although technically Ethiopian Observer has managed the interview process and the concerns of the interview topic and teams with organized in cooperation of Institute of Development and Education, IDA. And I appreciate that the cooperation that we had over 20 years with Dr. Ghehlawdos. Ethiopian Observer has a pleasure and a distinct to have Dr. Ghehlawdos Araya on this Zoom interview. And we'd like to introduce him briefly before we begin the interview, even though Dr. Ghehlawdos doesn't need so much interview, but this is a process. He's an icon on the social media, on his current writings, and over 7 books in English and Tigrinya, as well as in Amharic. Who is Dr. Ghehlawdos? I think Dr. Ghehlawdos is a political scientist and educator by profession and a historian by vocation. He's a graduate of the world famous Columbia University and earned his degree, including BA, MA, and a doctorate from the same university. He is a prolific writer and authored many books, over probably of 300-400 articles on Ethiopia and Africa and international study. He is also the founder of the Institute of Development Education, IDA. Thank you, Dr. Ghehlawdos, for coming for this interview from your busy schedule.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Barakat Kiros. I am really gratified to have this interview with you. And I like to really extend my gratitude to you and the Ethiopian Observer for doing this. And I also want to thank you for being so kind and encouraging in the statements you've made in the introduction. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ghehlawdos, Professor Ghehlawdos. On behalf of Ethiopian Observer, it's Barakat Kiros that I am going to manage and lead the interview. On the first question, I know you are very familiar and you have written so much in regard to this over the last 25, 30 years. One of the questions you have repeatedly addressed the question of nationalities and ethnic politics in Ethiopia. In many of your writing, do you think the question of nationality will resolve in Ethiopia and we can ever transcend the ethnic politics given the present chaotic atmosphere in the country?
Back in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, when the students actually raised the question of nationalities, way in the early 1970s. And to be sure, the question of nationalities were heralded by the Ethiopian students, but it was actually really implemented by the EPRDF, the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front. However, before the EPRDF, the Derg government, the military government, made an attempt to address the question of nationalities, but it contradicted itself by fighting the nationalities themselves. So it didn't work during the Derg period. However, this question of nationalities, way back in 1995, my debut book entitled Ethiopia, the Political Economic Transition, I wrote about it. I actually congratulated the EPRDF for resolving the question of nationalities by creating a federal government, by also establishing what they call the regional states. But at the same time, I actually had some concerns then, because I said to myself, and I wrote it in the book, it's good to resolve the question of nationalities peacefully and justly, and it's also good to allow the various nationalities of Ethiopia to flourish their language and culture. However, in the long run, I argued the question of nationalities itself may create ethnic politics or ethnicity or ethnic consciousness. And then gradually the pan-Ethiopian agenda could be forgotten. That's what I said. That exactly happened now. People are thinking in terms of their ethnicity only. People don't identify themselves as Ethiopian. So that's the problem I see. However, this thing is not unique to Ethiopia, really. People by nature gravitate toward their own ethnic group, wherever you go. And a long time ago, a sociologist, actually by the name Emil Durkheim, actually the founder, the father of sociology, he classified people into two: organic solidarity and mechanical solidarity. The organic ones are at the village level, people who know each other, the same people, same language, same culture, okay, uniform. But mechanical is diverse, different people, different language, mixing up together, living together side by side. So that's what we have in Ethiopia now. If you go to the major cities like Addis Ababa, Mekelle, and Awassa, you're going to see diverse people. If you go to small cities, small villages, you're going to see the organic solidarity. So that's the main problem we have now. However, it has to be corrected in the long run. That's what I think about this question.
Thank you, Professor Ghehlawdos. Our second question is, do you think that the overall political culture in Ethiopia has shown any significant change during the rule of the APRDF, and how during the Abiy Ahmed Prosperity Party? How do we reconcile both?
Okay, that's a good question too. Political culture is very important in any country, in any given society. If a country or a society doesn't have political culture, is not going to do very well in terms of running the daily affairs, in terms of resolving conflicts, in terms of running the government itself, so many things. So I would actually really say quite frankly and candidly, no, the political culture did not show any significant change during the rule of the APRDF. The APRDF actually governed Ethiopia for 27 years. It did very well in infrastructure, in economic growth, and in development as a whole. But it did not do well in terms of promoting democracy in Ethiopia. I have argued in my book, actually, that there is no democracy in Ethiopia. But APRDF, one can give credit in terms of trying to promote the economic transformation of that country. On top of this, one of the problems I saw in terms of promoting political culture is the APRDF actually kept Ethiopian intellectuals and professionals at bay. It did not invite them. It did not allow them to participate. Had it done that, political culture could have flourished in Ethiopia. Actually, the APRDF itself could have benefited a lot from that. The present crisis could have been halted as well. They did not do that. any country, in order to have a political culture, should completely rely on on its educational forces like professionals and intellectuals. That opportunity was lost during the EPRDF 27 years of rule. And now it got worse. In the last 2 years, Ethiopia is in shambles, let alone having political culture. So I hope something is going to come out of this. Okay.
Thank you. We have a series of questions, very important, related to each other. So bear with me, Professor.
Okay,
The third question is, what do you think of the Ethiopian opposition political party vis-a-vis the national parties like OLF and the TPLF, as well as the Prosperity Party?
Okay, that's also a very good question and relevant question as well to the present affairs in Ethiopia. Overall, the opposition or contending parties
We have a connection problem. We have a connection problem. I can't hear you.
is behind bars.
Can you, Professor, we lost you for about seconds. Can we start all over?
Yeah, I can go back, yeah. What I was saying was overall, the opposition or contending parties are in bad shape right now because the leaders of some parties like the Oromo Federalist Congress, like Bakala Garba, are behind bars. And the Ethiopian Democratic Party, the leader, Ledotto Ayello, is imprisoned as well. And most of them are being charged with this type of whatever by the government, and then they are having problems for sure. And TPLF, although relatively strong, and Tigray relatively peaceful, it's isolated in the north, okay? So we have a problem with these political parties for sure. What I was expecting was this government to exhibit some kind of rule of law and allow, as it promised the first time Abiy came, to allow a debate culture, an open political debate. That's political culture, by the way. That didn't happen. That could have given them an edge to the opposition parties. But on the contrary, they are being harassed and imprisoned now. So that's a problem.
Yeah, the number 4 question is in regard of one of your books, Ethiopia, Democracy, Devolution of Power, and the Development State. Here is a book for those people who are interested. So having said that, the question is pretending to, you have decided a part of, with its chapter, for the development state in your book, Ethiopia, Democracy, Devolution, Power, and the Development State. Do you think that the development state is still a viable option for Ethiopia as opposed to neoliberal agenda that is considered as an alternate for development strategy by the Prosperity Party and other parties that are now acting as allies of the Prosperity Party?
That's a very interesting question. Very interesting. In fact, for me, it's also a good opportunity. Yeah, thank you so much for that. In that book actually, the title, Ethiopia, Democracy, Devolution of Power, and the Developmental State. So one whole part actually is on developmental state. So first and foremost, we have to really clearly define what the developmental state, or DS in short, means. A lot of people confuse the developmental state with a socialist system. It's not. Developmental state, actually, most of them are capitalist, as a matter of fact. But what it means is, in the developmental state economic agenda, the state or the government is directly involved the state or the government make economic policies. The state and the government actually make industrial policies. What industry they give priority to or not is done by the developmental state. And it's heavily involved in the making of the economy. Sometimes the state itself can own some industries as well. So a good example, many people actually associate the developmental state with the so-called tigers of Southeast Asia, the four tigers. These are Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore. They are actually the best example of developmental state, and they did very well in the economy. Actually, the World Bank calls them high-performing economies, okay? But they are not the only ones. Japan is a developmental state, and Japan is a good example of a capitalist state and a developmental state at the same time. And I prefer that of Japan as well for Ethiopia as a model, because Japan actually provides democracy and capitalist development at the same time, the developmental state. China is a developmental state too. China became the second economy because of that strategy. However, in China, we don't have democracy, okay? So is it a viable option as opposed to the neoliberal? That's a good question you made, Mr. Barakat. Yes, I say it's a viable option. The current government actually wants to go away from the developmental state option. They are actually saying we're going to have a neoliberal thing. The neoliberal thing didn't work in Africa, in the Caribbean, in Asia, in South America. It didn't work at all. Because I recall very well when the World Bank came up with the Structural Adjustment Program in 1981. All countries in Africa failed. Their economy was destroyed. They actually faced economic disaster, really. Then in 1997, the same bank said the government should be involved in the making of the economy. The same bank, after the destruction was done, long after that, actually, really. So we need the government, we need the state in developing countries to promote economic development. That's why I say we still need, you remember, Mr. Barakat, you remember, we have these major projects like the dam and the railway. Some of them are postponed. One of the railway that starts from Djibouti and goes via Haragabia to Mekelle, it's completely stopped, completely. Many projects have stopped. It's only the developmental state that it can do it. No neoliberal is going to do that for you. Investors are going to come for their own interest first. So the interest of the country could be guaranteed by the developmental state only. That's why I say we should have that option. We need that option. Okay, that's how I answer that question.
Thank you. This is our number 5 question. A while ago, you have written on the unitary elite politics and grassroots federalist forces in Ethiopia. For the sake of our audience, clarity on the topic, can you please clarify and delineate the difference between the unitarian and the federalist groups? And do you think federalism is important for Ethiopia at this juncture of its history?
Okay, this is also good. This is going to give us an opportunity now to explain to our audience the essential difference between the federal system, the unitarian systems. To begin with, if you go across the board in our globe, unitarian states are more in terms of number, because that's how history began. Uniting by force and violence sometimes, and what have you. The federal systems are few in number compared to the unitarian. But the federal countries are more just in terms of creating equality and stability and peace for their citizens. That's why we need the federal system. The federal system, to begin with, was initially established to correct the wrong in the respective societies, the inequality in the respective societies. Whatever problems we have, it's only the federal system that can actually really correct it. Okay? And for Ethiopia, it became very suitable, especially like the question I addressed earlier, the question of nationalities. In order to resolve the question of national, we have 80 linguistic groups in Ethiopia. So at least it's via the federal system, by giving them their local autonomous administrative zones in order to flourish their language and culture. The federal system allows. A unitarian state cannot do that. It was impossible. We've seen it via Ethiopian modern history, especially during Emperor Haile Selassie. Whole of Ethiopia is governed from one center in Addis Ababa, one center, that's it. There were no other centers. What the federal system does is there is one center, a national center, which is the capital of a country, but they also create other centers. Recently, South Africa, for instance, came up with 3 capital cities, never heard before. So initially it was Pretoria, now you have Bloemfontein and Cape Town, additional capital cities. Why they want to do that? They want to devolve things, okay? They want to give more autonomy to the administrative zones. It's only the federal government can do that, actually, really. So I believe the federal system should continue in Ethiopia. And it's not just my thinking or my wish. The Ethiopian people, the majority of them, starting from Tigray, Afar, Somali, South, Gambela, Benishangul, Harari, you can go on and on and on. They all actually want the federal system. They are objecting the current government in Ethiopia, which is going toward a unitarian state. They say we do not need any unitary thing. We're not going to go back to the old system. We need our own autonomy. We need our freedom. That's what they're saying. So you have to really read the minds and hearts of the people. Okay? So the federal system is a viable option for Ethiopia. Okay, that's it.
I remember on July 20, you wrote an article entitled, "There is no alternative to national reconciliation and the national dialogue in Ethiopia."
Yeah.
What do you mean by there is no alternative? You seem very certain on that.
Okay, that's good. I actually deliberately say there is no alternative, but with respect to national question, Mr. Barakat, you yourself remember, I wrote so many times on the national reconciliation, so many times, in 2001, in 2010. When I wrote in 2010, I remember very well, you too.
Yeah, I did contribute in support of
people. And I also remember Dr. Tedros Kiros also wrote about it. So we all of us wrote about the reconciliation thing. I mean, national reconciliation is a good thing. And it's not just the political people, intellectuals or professionals like you that want to promote national reconciliation. Even the major religions advocate for national reconciliation. They've done it in South Africa, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, okay? But it looks like we have a problem in Ethiopia. We could not sit down on a round table and talk peacefully, ironing out our differences peacefully. That's what I'm saying actually now. These groups, the political groups, the TPLF or other groups and the so-called Prosperity Party of Abiy Ahmed should sit down with other parties and reconcile or iron out their differences. That's what reconciliation means. And I don't see any other alternative really, unless we're going to go to a civil war, bloody civil war. The people are tired, Ethiopian people are tired of that. They have had enough. So we need a peaceful transition. And the only one that can really give us an edge toward peaceful transition is the national reconciliation act. In national reconciliation, I mean, by the way, all Ethiopians, not just the political groups, all Ethiopians at all levels. Because, remember, about 3 million people are destabilized in Ethiopia now, internally destabilized. They need to reconcile with their neighbors. They have to sit down. We've had traditional systems actually that can do that. They can do it. So I don't see any other option. I mean, people have to come to their senses and forget this hate politics, ethnic politics, and sit down and talk. That's the only one.
Thank you. Just a follow-up. Is there any lesson to be learned from South Africa and others who did reconciliation, what they are in, as opposed to, if it takes a reconciliation currently in Ethiopia, do you think we'll be able to pull together and put the national interest of the country and the people?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. South Africans, to some extent, they were successful, although they could not completely resolve the differences between the white South Africans, Afrikaner, who still control the economy. And although the blacks came to power, they are in control of politics. They've not controlled the economy yet. So at that point, they have to do something else. But at least in terms of reconciling the black and white differences of old apartheid, in that they were successful for sure. They were successful. But not just South Africa, we can actually learn from other African countries as well. Botswana, for instance, is a very good example. In Botswana, they have a very good political culture. Indigenous, actually, they did not even copy it from other countries or from Western countries. And for instance, I remember a couple of years ago, there was a miners' strike in Botswana. The miners went to strike and the government came and negotiated with them directly. What do you want? We want this. That was resolved. But it's part of the culture of the people. They sit and negotiate. They sit and talk. You see, that's the thing. So we should be able to do that too in Ethiopia. And we've had it. Ethiopia, most of Ethiopia have had it actually. In Tigray, for instance, there was this Baito 10, Shmagele 10. They were resolving problems all the time for centuries. So we can utilize those mechanisms as well,
Yeah, yeah. With due respect, in my area where I was born, there is what you call Erkenderta, where they can reconcile in the village.
Absolutely.
Professor, you are very well accustomed to it. The second question, this is the question, knowing you over 25 years, how passionate you are about Pan-African and Pan-Ethiopian. My question will be focused on that. In terms of your philosophy and your political principle, you are Pan-Ethiopianist and Pan-Africanist. How do you reconcile your proposition and your reasoning with the nationalist forces in Ethiopia that aspire to form and establish their own independent statehood? I mean, this starts from your student movement.
I think I think that's a good question. It's a fair question too, by the way. Here we go. All of us do have political stance, viewpoints, perspectives, ideologies
Indeed.
But we follow, all of us.
Yeah.
I mean, I know from the very beginning when I was even in my high school days, I used to see like the bigger picture for some unknown reason. And then when I went to the university, I became, in fact, an internationalist, not just an Ethiopian, pan-Ethiopian, but internationalist. All of us were like that. We were supporting the cause of other people like Vietnam, whatever. We used to do that. And then in terms of my own profession, the last 27 years, I've been teaching African studies and promoting Pan-African thing. At the same, I have written on Pan-Africanism so many times, actually. But quite frankly, the Pan-African thing now, in retrospect, has become more ideal now, rather than pragmatic and practical. It's too ideal to completely unite the whole continent of Africa. It took like 60 years, but it's not working. But I still want to stick and hold on with my pan-Ethiopian thing, because Ethiopia is our country. It's a historic Ethiopia I'm talking about now. It's a wonderful country, land of Lucy, of the Homo sapiens. The first people ever were found in Ethiopia, never colonized, the only independent country in the continent of Africa, and headquarters of the African Union now, and so many things you can go on and on about Ethiopia actually. But unfortunately, Ethiopia did not enjoy leaders whom I call enlightened leaders, people with vision, people that can promote justice and equality. We did not get that. So we still are poor people. That's why we have mess now in Ethiopia, by the way. So I still want to hold to that because I have always argued, I always respect the local autonomy for the various regional states like Tigray, like Oromia, like Harare, like Benishangul Gumuz and Gambela. But at the same time, these various regional states should come together and promote the pan-Ethiopian agenda. It has so many advantages at global level, global trade. You can survive only via Ethiopia, not via local government. If you're a small government, a small country, you cannot even compete in the global economy at all. Bigger countries are doing very well. There are exceptions like Switzerland and Japan, but those are exceptions really. But most countries that are big are successful. So Ethiopia has enormous potential. It has to come like one, but we're still respecting the local autonomy I'm talking about. So I would like to promote pan-Ethiopian agenda now and in the future as well.
Good. What do you think, Professor, in terms of United Africa, in terms of economy to have its own sphere in the world?
Okay. That's a good question. You see, what happened is this. Africans have tried so many times, by the way. Soon after independence, they were going all over, making conferences. After the 1963 conference, there was the Cairo conference of 1964. People, the leaders like Nyerere and Nasser and Nkrumah and Senghor, all of them were talking about a United States of Africa. They were talking about it actually so many times about that, but it could not become practical. Then they came up with an option. In 1980, they had a conference in Lagos. It's called the Lagos Plan of Action, how to transform the whole continent by cooperating all of them, via agriculture, via industry, without depending on the previous or former colonizers. To some extent it worked, and then it did not continue. Then they started other options, which is really good actually. Regional cooperations, like for instance, you have ECOWAS in West Africa, economic organization for West African states. And then we have SADC in Southern African Development Community. We have also the COMISA, which is Eastern and Southern. IGAD is by far weaker for the Horn of Africa, but that one is regional cooperation as well. And they've been doing this for so many decades. Now in 2000, when was that? A couple of years ago, 3-4 years ago, all Africans gathered in Rwanda. In Rwanda, what's the capital of Rwanda? I forgot.
Kigali.
Kigali, thank you. Kigali. In Kigali, they came up with what they call Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. This is really a good one. I have written about it as a matter of fact. So they're going to try to cooperate at Africa level, economically, trade-wise, and what have you. So I think eventually it's going to work. They are on the right track now.
Thank you.
How it is, okay?
Thank you for elaborating in terms of economy and politics in Africa.
Yeah.
Forward. Our number 8 question is about the Horn of Africa. In your Horn of Africa disaster politics and geopolitical implication, you have critically examined the political crisis in the Horn of Africa. Can you please explain why the Horn of Africa, compared to other regions in Africa, is crisis-prone, or as you put it, a disaster-infested political arena?
Yeah, this is my very recent article, actually, Horn of Africa Disaster Politics and its Geopolitical Implications. This actually, in order for our audience to understand, to have clarity on this one, it requires some historical background. Because with respect to the Horn of Africa, unlike other African countries or African regions, this is the most conflict zone ever in the African continent. Has to do with the history. The history has to do with long competition between global powers and regional powers as well. Long during the Aksumite period, for instance, I remember the southern half of the Red Sea was controlled by Aksum, and the northern half by the Romans, because Egypt was their colony then. However, they were cooperating at the same time, both powers. Romans had to depend on the Aksumites for the safety and security of their commercial ships. And then in the 16th, 17th centuries, there were the Ottomans and the Portuguese. The same problem. The Ottomans want to control that part of the world, and we had conflicts in Ethiopia as well. Grand Muhammad himself was supported by the Ottomans, and the Portuguese supported the so-called Christian government of Ethiopia. And then in the 20th century, the same thing happened actually. And then when the colonizers came, it was Horn of Africa was divided into many colonial zones. And now we have, the Arabs are interested in controlling the Red Sea and other interests. And then it's not just the Red Sea now, the Nile as well. Egypt wants to control the Nile. And then due to all this, the conflict was there for a long time, continuously. We couldn't come out from there. But I do not only attribute the problem to external forces only. We have a problem within ourselves, the governments themselves. Somalia is a failed state now. South Sudan is a failed state. I was very sad to learn a week ago that South Sudan can no longer purchase goods from outside because it doesn't have money to cover its external trade balance. It could not do it because of conflict. This country, can you imagine, is sitting on oil, petroleum, but it could not even do for its trade balance. And you can go on and on and on. There is, so many problems in that part of the world. So that's why I call it actually disaster politics, really. Ethiopia, by comparison, was actually doing very well, irrespective of the lack of democracy and what have you. Economically, it was doing very well. It was stable also for 27 years. But now Ethiopia has become like these countries, actually. It's almost being done deliberately to really imitate Eritrea and Somalia and South Sudan. It has become like them, actually, Ethiopia. It's very sad. That's why I call it disaster politics, okay?
In the light of, just follow-up question, your thoughts. Ethiopia is a landlocked country. And those areas that you are talking about, Somalia, Djibouti, Eritrea, they have access to the sea. In the light of security interests, what is viable for Ethiopia in terms of its security? Because in previous times Ethiopia had a naval force. In the light of all those securities, do you think that will contribute to the demise of its security being compromised?
Yeah, absolutely. The security of the Horn of
Aside
Africa
from
is
trade, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. However, remember, having a port doesn't mean anything unless you use it. Okay? And Ethiopia is depending heavily on Djibouti. It's actually costing her billions of dollars. So at one point, actually, I came up with the unification. I have had an interview with the Voice of America, and I came up with the idea, you remember? I came up with the idea of uniting, because the Djiboutian people, the leaders themselves, were asking for unification with Ethiopia. So we could have gotten a free port, and they could have gotten anything, any supply, any resource they want from Ethiopia. Djibouti doesn't have anything. It's a small country. You cannot grow anything in that. Even water goes from Ethiopia, okay? So that could have been a wonderful thing, but they did not do it. The Djiboutians were actually really, really asking hard to unite with Ethiopia. Our leaders did not want to do it. It's very sad, Okay.
Well, let's move to this. We have two more questions. And how do you think Ethiopia is going to emerge out of the present mess and reclaim at least the past relative peace and stability during the PRDF times?
Okay. This is a good question. However, it's a little difficult to come up with a viable solution, because we're really in a mess now. How do you come out? How do you emerge out of that? See, one solution I see is the federal forces in Ethiopia have to gather momentum, like they've done. They had two meetings in Maqala, I remember, in Tigray. They've had two meetings, and they established even an organization, but it looks like it's not working now. So they have to re-energize themselves, because they are all over Ethiopia. They are in the south, in Oromia, and the Oromo, most of the Oromos support the federal thing. The Somalis, despite their leaders, support the federal thing, the Afars as well support. So the federal forces should get together, gather momentum, and salvage Ethiopia from its current mess. By the way, we should not leave this thing to them only. You, Mr. Barakat, you're a professional. You've done so many things in the Seattle area. I know it very well. You're a community organizer, so you can do your part. I, as an intellectual and scholar, I can do my part. Let's the intellectual and professional diaspora Ethiopians get together and salvage Ethiopia, irrespective of our differences and all those things. We have to come together and do something about it. We cannot stand by and see Ethiopia falling, Ethiopia failing. We cannot do that. We cannot afford to do that. So recently, you might have heard 22 Congress people of the United States Congress have seen the problem. They have said Ethiopia is going toward the wrong direction, so that we need to do something about it. Even these people are saying that. You and I are Ethiopians. By the way, you and I are from Tigray, but we are Ethiopians, okay? It doesn't matter whether we're from Tigray or Amhara or Oromo or Afar, okay? The bottom line now is we got to rescue this country. We got to do it. It's our historic responsibility. How we're going to do it is going to be hard, but let's try. Let's do whatever we can do. Okay?
I agree, Professor. The problem that we have among Ethiopian elites or political contenders is that they look through a narrow prism of their own political interests as opposed to centering Ethiopia as a middle ground. If there is no Ethiopia, there is no politics. So I think, it should be a set of mind that we have to change the way we think about politics. So
Absolutely.
our thoughts should be anchored around Ethiopia's survival and viability. And I agree with you 100%. Our last question will be, what is your vision or political forecast for Ethiopia future in general and its development trajectory in particular?
That's a good one. Yeah, I mean, for any political scientist can come up with any forecast. That's easy to do, but you got to have a vision that is doable, that you can implement. So actually, as a matter of wish, I see Ethiopia is going to come out from all these problems. In fact, at one point, it's going to be one of the promising countries in Africa. I recall when Ethiopia was doing very well, the Economist magazine said a more promising future for Africa, they wrote. They even said, what do you call them, this, the line what? This group of Africans, what do they call them? So like we call the tigers and we call the lions for Africans.
It's a sucker, yeah.
They said there is some promise. Ethiopia is doing very well, they said actually. This is for a long time they were saying poor countries, undeveloped countries, lost decade and whatever, all negative attributes. But at one point they said a more promising country, Ethiopia. So I see a more promising thing. It's going to come. For sure it's going to come. But we need to do something about it. So the vision I see is this. It has to depend on something tangible. Something tangible. What I mean by that is this. Ethiopia needs a leader or group of leaders that are visionary, that are enlightened, that are people of justice, okay, that truly believe in equality of Ethiopians, not only a power-hungry thing. The power-hungry can sit there and do nothing, but these people who really prioritize the interests of the people and the nation, by the way, national interests, they're going to lead Ethiopia out of this mess. So I see that thing. I see that thing is going to come, and I hope it's going to happen. Okay?
Thank you, Professor Ghehlawdos. That will be concluding our interview on behalf of Ethiopian Observer and Institute of Development and Education of Africa.
That's wonderful.
And I would like to conclude my remarks that I would like to believe in those uncertain times, all political parties should be stand for democracy, equality, and justice for all Ethiopians. We must work hard for the realization of a prosperous and democratic of Ethiopia. And as they say, let's hope. Hope doesn't kill. Thank you so much. And I appreciate your presence on the Zoom as always did.
I thank you so much too, Mr. Barakat. Have a great day.